Migrants and refugees are not pawns on the chessboard of humanity. Pope Francis. Los migrantes y los refugiados no son piezas en el ajedrez de la humanidad. That was one of Pope Francis's most famous lines about immigrants and immigration, a cause that he cared about so much. Mi gente, soy Mariana Atencio. Welcome to the Mariana Atencio Show. Today, His Holiness Pope Francis has died. Ha muerto el Papa Francisco. In 2015, I had the rare privilege of virtually interviewing Pope Francis at a church in McAllen, Texas. I was one of the few American correspondents who had the luxury of being able to speak to him not only in English, but in his native language, in Spanish. When I was able to conduct that virtual interview before the days of Zoom, this was 2015, he had relatively recently become appointed as the 266th Pope. He was appointed in 2013 when he was 76 years old, and I was able to conduct this interview in 2015. This was right before his first official US visit. But let's talk a little bit about why the world is in shock, what he meant, not only to me, but to so many of you who are tuning in. We're talking about the first non-European Pope in over 1,000 years, the first Pope from the global South, the first Pope from the Americas and from Latin America, the first Jesuit Pope. Yo como venezolana, as a Venezuelan, as a Latin American, as a proud Catholic, and someone who attended a Jesuit university in undergrad. Yo asistí a la Universidad Católica Andrés Bello, universidad orgullosamente jesuita. I am shocked and saddened just like the rest of the world. And I'm also proud of the impact that he made on the Catholic Church and in our region, even if it was controversial at times, which we will talk about later on the show today during our 6 p.m. live stream here on YouTube. He was also the first pontiff to take the name Francis after St. Francis of Assisi. Y es por eso, and that is why I am wearing my cross. I hope that you guys can see it here on the screen. My cross from St. Francis of Assisi. I had the opportunity to visit Assisi with my family 2 years ago when we went to Rome and took a car and drove to the outskirts and learned about St. Francis and Santa Clara and their vow of poverty and to help those most in need, which was what drove Pope Francis. And that's why he selected this name. So when Pope Francis was appointed, March 13th, 2013, he was chosen during this papal conclave to succeed Pope Benedict XVI, who had resigned in February of that year. His name, Cardenal Jorge Mario Bergoglio. He was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Argentina. He was elected and, as I mentioned, accepted the name Francis. I also went down to Buenos Aires, to Argentina, to do a whole investigative trip about his legacy there and, you know, if he really walked the walk. What did the poorest of the poor in Argentina have to say about Pope Francis? I asked them firsthand, and let me tell you that most people said he was legit, that he spent Christmases there in the so-called villas. And I will also go into that during our show later on today at 6 p.m. But going back to this virtual audience, I was actually reviewing some of the clips that I wanted to play you guys today and was once again pleasantly surprised by his candor, by his frankness. I think what I'm about to show you is a testament to his simplicity and this unique connection that he had with people, his charisma, and what he meant to every single person that he spoke to, Catholics especially, and migrants especially. Lo que les voy a mostrar me conmovió mucho verlo cuando estaba seleccionando el material hoy, porque realmente es un reflejo de lo que él era, de su espontaneidad, de su simplicidad, y por eso es que escogí hoy mostrárselos a ustedes. So it was the first ever virtual audience, and the landmark event allowed Pope Francis to connect with people. So it was people in different locations. The Pope was in Rome at the Vatican, and there were 3 correspondents from ABC News at the time. So this was one of my special participations at ABC News when I worked at Fusion. One correspondent was in Chicago. That was, I believe, Tom Llamas, who's now an anchor at NBC News. In Texas, it was Cecilia Vegas, who's now an anchor on 60 Minutes at CBS. And I was in McAllen, Texas. This was a significant moment for Pope Francis to engage with Americans directly before his visit. So fostering a sense of connection and compassion. And I was there at that church. Y quiero darles un poquito de trasfondo right before I throw to the first clip, because obviously the Pope is in the Vatican and there were these 2 other correspondents in 2 other cities. So I told the people there, and you guys know that I'm very energetic. We were, the Latin Americans. I had people that had just walked 1,300 miles from Central America to the border, and I got the opportunity to tell them, you're going to speak to the Pope today. O sea, imagínense eso. So I told my group of people in the church, listen, when David Muir, who was anchoring, and he's still the anchor at ABC, when David Muir comes to us, we need to be the loudest, the most cheerful. Pope Francis needs to feel the true Latin American spirit, not only of me as a conduit here, but of everybody who's here. O sea, tiene que sentir ese calor latinoamericano. And it was almost like to say, we need to beat out the other 2 cities to show that we're the ones that are most excited to see him and to talk to him. So I managed to have them say, se ve, se siente, el Papa está presente. I want you to hear that moment when David Muir tosses to me and the whole church just erupts in applause at the sight of His Holiness. Let's watch it.
Let's go to Sacred Heart Church on the U.S.-Mexico border, McAllen, Texas, and Mariana.
And just that smile there, ahí le vieron la sonrisa. I cannot describe to you guys. It's a smile that will just melt your heart. You could feel him there in the moment. And you bet the other 2 cities didn't have to, se ve, se siente, el Papa está presente. O sea, we blew everybody else out of the water. And I also want to give you guys context as to what the people there were experiencing. These were mostly migrants from the Northern Triangle countries, El Salvador, Honduras, y Nicaragua. Many of them had walked 1,300 miles to get to the U.S. southern border. This was a fiscal year 2014. I want to bring you back to that moment. This was during President Obama's second term, and the U.S. Border Patrol had apprehended approximately 500,000 people along the southwest border that were in U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So this year, and when I did that town hall with Pope Francis, it marked a significant shift in migration patterns, because these 500,000 people, for the first time, and this is so important to understand in today's context, for the first time, they were non-Mexican nationals. For the first time, the people that were coming were from Central America, and they outnumbered Mexicans in apprehension. And this was also the first time that this marked a notable shift in the surge of children that were being sent across the border. Niños solos. Este año marcó un hito en eso. And that's why the Pope wanted to speak to them. And that's why it was so important for ABC News to place me there. But put yourself in the shoes of these people that had walked 1,300 miles. So I imagine everything that they went through along the way. And when they get to this church in McAllen, Texas, and the name of this church, this is the Sacred Heart Church, and a humanitarian respite center had just been built there by Sister Norma Pimentel, who we will talk about, because of this enormous surge in people. So put yourself in the shoes of these people. Acaban de caminar cientos de millas, les ha pasado todo en el camino, and I got to tell them, out of the blue, because they're not watching the television. They don't know what's being announced. Out of the blue, I get to tell them, today, you're going to meet Pope Francis and you're going to get to ask him a question. O sea, the faces of these people, because also think about Central Americans, Latin Americans, we're all believers. Most of us are Catholics. So we are all really just faith-based communities. La gente es muy creyente en Centroamérica and Latinoamérica. Entonces, for these people, it was as if everything that they went through, their whole journey was sort of blessed by God. You know, they felt redeemed in so many ways. So I want to play a moment for you guys where I explain to the audience the immigration context, what we're doing there, and I tell the Pope what is happening and the kinds of stories that he's going to listen to during that virtual audience. Let's hear it. Now, Holy Father, as you may know, this church where I'm standing right now turned its parish hall into a welcome center for more than 20,000 immigrants from Latin America. That effort was spearheaded by Sister Norma Pimentel, seated here, whose work I want to acknowledge today. But also seated here with me today are several mothers and their children who just crossed into the United States. And I want to tell you some of their stories. So those were the kinds of stories that I was going to present to the Pope. Mostly families that had just crossed the U.S. southern border seeking asylum, mothers, a lot of children, as I mentioned, DACA recipients, of course, and of course they didn't cross the border, but it was an example of the kind of immigration debate that we were dealing with at the time, that we're still dealing with it, which is why I was thinking this morning that it was so poignant to share these clips with you guys. So this was the moment when I introduced the Pope to this mother, this mother was named Vilma, and she was holding her little baby Ernesto. They had come from El Salvador because he suffered from this illness that they couldn't find medical help for in El Salvador. So I want to play for you guys the moment in which I introduce this mother and this child to the Pope, and just look at his reaction. Miren la reacción del Papa. Let's hear it. First, I want you to meet Vilma. Come here, Vilma. Vilma came from El Salvador, Holy Father, and she was apprehended for crossing the border illegally. She now has to wear this electronic ankle bracelet that you can see here, put by the Border Patrol to keep her from fleeing. And she says she came here seeking a better life for her small son, Ernesto. Vilma, tell the Holy Father about your son's condition. Cuéntale al Santo Padre sobre la condición del pequeño Ernesto.
Well, my son has had a problem since birth. He was born with his eyes like this. He has a congenital condition. He has cataracts in his eyes. He can't see well with his eyes.
So just again, put yourself in the shoes of that mother who's been carrying this baby 1,300 miles across the border. No matter your stance on immigration, you have to feel for these people. Also politically, I want to point out, judging from your reactions to the video that we posted last week about the Bukele shift and what's happened with Bukele in Central America, these were families coming from El Salvador. You don't have families like that coming in those numbers anymore. You don't have families sending their kids by themselves from El Salvador in those numbers anymore because of what Bukele has achieved in El Salvador, this transformation of his country. And again, whether you like him or not, he's surely controversial. But this is what I meant when I told you guys last week about the 2014 surge in unaccompanied children that we saw here at the border. You're not seeing now from El Salvador because of what Bukele has done. So we have to give him that, and we have to recognize that his cracking down on gang violence there has made it at least a stable place for many Salvadorians to live and to be there with their families, as I myself have witnessed down there. So Pope Francis blessed this mother and this daughter. I don't know if we have that moment. Luis, no sé si tenemos el momento donde le da la bendición el Papa Francisco. Gracias, Vilma. Gracias, Ernestico. And finally, Holy Father, I want you to meet Wendy.
Quisiera decir
Wendy,
una palabra
come here.
I would like to say one word.
Había allí una hermana, una religiosa.
There was a sister there from a religious order. I want to see her.
Hermana Norma.
Estaba escondida entre la
She
gente.
was hidden there among all the people.
Hermana,
Sister, sister, I want to thank you.
yo quiero agradecer
And through
en su
you,
persona
I want to
a
thank
todas las
all
religiosas de
the
los
sisters
Estados
of
Unidos
religious orders in the U.S.
el trabajo que
for
las
the work
religiosas
that you
han hecho y hacen
have
en
done
los
and that you
Estados
do in the
Unidos
United
es
States.
grandioso.
It's great.
So right after he blessed that mother and that child, as you saw, I was going to continue with the broadcast because this was being broadcast for ABC News' 2020. Y ahí me interrumpió el Papa. That was the moment where the Holy Father, His Holiness, interrupted me. And you were able to see some of that spontaneity, some of that authenticity, some of that candor that made him such a beloved figure globally. Cuando de una, he had noticed that before when I gave the introduction, como que la hermana se paró así, and I didn't acknowledge her because I had to continue with the broadcast. And he's like, no, I want to acknowledge the sisters that's there. Ahí escondida entre la gente. And that was such a special moment because Sister Norma Pimentel is the executive director of Catholic Charities in the Rio Grande Valley in McAllen, Texas. She oversees the Humanitarian Respite Center. Y ella es una mujer que ha hecho tanto, tanto, tanto por los migrantes en esa zona. If you have, 500,000 people just being apprehended by the Border Patrol at that time, so many kids coming, she had to turn her church and her respite center into practically an immigration processing facility. Entonces, she was really one of the pivotal figures of the immigration debate during that time and still is. And the fact that he was able to acknowledge her in this way was truly incredible. And not only to acknowledge her, but nuns all across the United States. I want to keep playing another shot for you guys of this moment because aquí es donde el Papa se muestra realmente latinoamericano, nos hizo sonrojar a todas. He made us blush with what he said next, and I want you guys to listen to it now.
Las felicito.
I congratulate
Sean valientes.
you. Be
Vayan
courageous.
adelante.
Move forward.
En primera línea.
Take
siempre.
the lead. Always.
Les digo una cosa
I'll tell you
más.
one other thing.
Queda feo
Is it
que lo diga un
inappropriate for the
papa,
Pope
no
to
sé.
say this? I
Las
love you
quiero
all
mucho.
very much.
Gracias, Santo Padre. Thank you, Holy Father. And you can see Sister Norma's reaction right there. Ella conmovida cuando hizo así. The Pope was a great believer and a great promoter of nuns in the Americas. I also want to say that in my own home country of Venezuela, Sister Carmen Rendiles was recently named the first Venezuelan female saint by Pope Francis. Aquí se los leo, la hermana Carmen Rendiles, recientemente canonizada como la primera santa venezolana y fue por el Papa Francisco. Entonces siempre fue gran promotor de las hermanas, de su labor. Lo vieron ahí con la hermana Norma. So I think one of the most poignant moments of that whole broadcast, I haven't shown to you guys yet, but I will in a second. And it was when I introduced the Pope to this little girl named Wendy, who had crossed from Central America with her mother. And take this into account, I had to pre-select the people that were going to ask the Pope questions. So I spent a whole day before, with the producers at ABC, talking to some of the folks that were going to participate in the broadcast. And, the cameras are rolling. And I had to be, again, just very selective of, can this person tell their story and not break down just because of the trauma that many of these families had experienced. And Wendy was a little girl when the producers told me, do you think that she's ready to talk to the pontiff, to talk to His Holiness. Me arrodillé and I spoke to Wendy and I listened to the trauma that she had experienced with her mother when they crossed the border. And this little girl was evidently very traumatized, but she was so strong. So in humanizing this debate, because that was the point of the whole broadcast, is to introduce America to the Pope, but also to humanize some of these people that had crossed the border. I knew that Wendy would be able to humanize the debate for so many Americans that didn't know who these Central American immigrants were. So let's listen to little Wendy when I asked her to introduce herself to Pope Francis. I want to introduce you to Wendy. Wendy is 11 years old, and she just made a 26-day journey with her mother and is from El Salvador. She wants to tell you a little bit about what she had to go through. Cuéntale al Santo Padre lo que viviste.
We came from El Salvador with my mom because it was too dangerous with the gangs.
Y en el camino, Wendy, ¿qué viviste? You could see, again, the trauma that child had faced, and she just, like, when she saw the Pope, completely broke down. I had to kneel to console her. And again, I'm doing a live broadcast, and His Holiness is watching us. And I truly felt that with Pope Francis, it was this thing where you truly felt the presence of God in that moment. How did he handle that? I want us to listen to the Pope and what Wendy did for him. Let's play it.
We were starving. We slept in the mountains with my mom. They were threatening my mom. And passing through the river, I almost drowned because the bag almost flipped over.
Pero ya llegaste. But she's here now, Holy Father, and she, even after everything she went through, she made a drawing for you. Muéstrale al Santo Padre lo que le hiciste, Wendy, lo que le dibujaste. So when you listen to that child, no matter where you stand on the political spectrum, you have to recognize that no human being, especially no child, deserves to go through that. And Pope Francis knew that, and it was such a central part of his message. Siempre tenía ese cariño y ese respeto por los migrantes, por los niños, por los que vivían en la periferia. We chose that child because she really represented a lot of the trauma that migrants go through to come here and the people that shouldn't have to go through that. And I think that it also helps us understand, again, the immigration debate that we're going through now and cases that shouldn't be the face of the immigration debate now. I want you to listen to the close because Wendy had a surprise for Pope Francis, and his face and the church's reaction when they saw it, it just still gives me goosebumps to this day. Let's watch it. Cuéntale qué hay en tu dibujo.
Hice un corazón. It's a heart, and I also drew you, my mom, and me. I drew a sun, clouds. Y puse, te quiero, Papa. I love you, Pope.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Holy Father, and on behalf of everyone here in la Iglesia del Sagrado Corazón in McAllen, Texas, thank you for addressing us today. Muchas gracias.
nosotros hoy.
Te quiero, Papa. And that reaction from that church and that smile from His Holiness is a gift that I experienced that I wanted to share with you guys today. That is who He was. And in that moment, He gave so much hope to so many. The fact that Pope Francis was the first Pope from the Americas, the first Latin American, the first Jesuit, the first Pope from the global South, and the fact that his candor and his warmth really broke through, that was truly what broke centuries of tradition. And the impact of that moment, both on me personally and on millions of Latinos and migrants around the world, is something that can't be put into words. I will finish with the full quote that I started our program with today. From Pope Francis: migrants and refugees are not pawns on the chessboard of humanity. They are children, women, and men who leave or are forced to leave their homes for various reasons, who share a legitimate desire for knowing and having, but above all, for being more. So on this day, and as this debate continues in America and in the rest of the world, I want us to remember the words and the example of Pope Francis. Bueno, me conmovió mucho volver a revivir estos momentos con ustedes hoy. Today at 6 p.m. on this show, we will be covering Pope Francis' legacy in Latin America. It is a controversial legacy. It is a mixed legacy from his time as Cardenal Bergoglio in Buenos Aires, Argentina, to becoming the head of the Catholic Church and visiting places that were controversial at the time, like Cuba, for example. We're going to talk about it all because, again, context and understanding the information is truly the first step in transforming what is to come. And from this space, I hope to give you guys some of that, especially the context as a Latina and as a proud Latin American. And today, on the day where we have lost the first ever Pope from Latin America, I thank you all for tuning in today. Les agradezco muchísimo haberse conectado hoy, un día que nos debe unir a todos como americanos sobre todas las cosas. I'm Mariana Atencio. Thank you so much for being here. Soy Mariana Atencio y gracias por estar aquí. Nos vemos hoy a las 6 de la tarde. See you guys right here at 6 p.m. Eastern today.